of the sparrows, and the boy who shoots the arrows. If I only had a heart.
Well, you know where that came from, right?
Picture me.
That's where we're going to film school today with my good friend Joe Fortunato. Joe's taking us back to 1939. And let's bring him in. Joe Fortunato with us, 93.5, 1590 WAKR. Joe, how about it, The Wizard of Oz?
Boy, it's a big one today, isn't it? Good morning, Ray. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. You're right. It's The Wizard of Oz today, celebrating its 85th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Released in the great year of 1939, generally considered Hollywood's greatest year. We've already done Gone with the Wind, but there's a few others in that year we might want to take a look at before the year is out. But today is The Wizard of Oz, released August 25th, 1939. Directed by Victor Fleming and King Vidor, and actually some others, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Written by Noel Langley, Florence Ryerson, Edgar Allan Wolfe, and based on the book by Frank L. Baum. Sorry about that. So I mentioned multiple directors. Ultimately, it took 14 writers and 5 directors to bring Baum's story to the screen. The stars, of course, are Judy Garland, Frank Morgan, Ray Bolger, Burt Lahr, Jack Haley, which we just heard a little snippet of there, Billy Burke, Margaret Hamilton, memorable roles all across it. It had 5 Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Art Direction, and Special Effects, and it won 2 for Best Song, Over the Rainbow, and its score. The 2 are in the AFI lists it as the 10th greatest movie of all time. When it has a sub-list of greatest fantasy films, it was number 1, of course. So many great lines in the film. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain was voted number 24 in the greatest movie lines of all time. There's no place like home, number 11. Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore, number 62. And the often misquoted, which is often misquoted as we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Kind of like one of those sort of misremembering things like we do with Play It Again, Sam, which is never said in Casablanca. The early part of when this film was being developed early on, it was MGM discovered that Walt Disney was working on his own version of Wizard of Oz at the same time. And rather than going head-to-head, both studios actually held discussions of possibly combining the two as a live-action animation hybrid movie, with MGM doing the live-action, of course, and Disney doing the animation. Scheduling issues sort of ultimately ended that collaboration, and Disney canceled their own version of the film, and MGM kind of won out on that, if you want to call it that. But this was also a result of MGM wanting to have a big hit movie like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was for Disney. They wanted kind of their own version of something like that. The conventional sort of belief is that the movie was sort of a box office failure on its initial release. It wasn't a huge hit, but it did do modestly well. It made its money back, and then, of course, has become a classic over the last generations. And the iconic ruby slivers are now in the Smithsonian Institute Natural Museum. I'm tongue-tied today, aren't I? It's all the Wizard of Oz. I wish I had a tongue, I guess, is my song. The National Museum of American History, it has the ruby slippers, and that's so popular, that exhibit, that the carpet in front of them has to be replaced numerous times each year.
Wow. Joe Fortunato looking at The Wizard of Oz. And, Joe, when you look at the production of this movie, black and white, right? And then it transitions to, quote, Technicolor.
Yeah, technically it's sepia tones and not black and white, but yeah, point taken. And what's interesting about that is they never in the trailers of the film, they never showed the Kansas sequences, which are in black and white or sepia tone. So whether that was intentional or just happy accident, but the thought is that MGM wanted moviegoers to think, oh, it's all in color, but it wasn't. It says, in fact, it even says photographed in Technicolor, not color sequences by Technicolor, making it seem like the entire film was made in color. So a little bit of a ruse there by MGM. So much to talk about here. This is generally considered the most watched movie in history, probably because of its huge number of television screenings each year for going on 50, 60, 70 years now. in one of the books called The Definitive Study of Cult Movies, it notes that Wizard of Oz is probably the most influential movie of all time, with many films directly or indirectly referencing it in a lot of different ways. Talking about the TV appearances, 44 million people tuned into its first television broadcast in 1956. That's a lot of television viewers in 1956 when not everybody even had a TV yet. I talked about multiple directors. The film actually had 5 different directors at one point. Richard Thorpe shot a few weeks of material. None of it made it into the film. They didn't like the studio didn't like his work. They appointed George Cukor temporarily. Cukor did a couple of he didn't film any scenes, but he modified Judy Garland and Ray Bolger's makeup. And Victor Fleming took over and filmed the bulk of the movie. And then he was assigned to Gone with Wind, so pretty good year for Victor Fleming. King Vidor then filmed the remaining sequences, and even the producer, Mervyn LeRoy, directed some of the traditional scenes. So usually when stuff like that happens, you've got yourself a mess of a movie, but obviously the movie god smiled on this one. Some of the shots were trimmed down or edited out of the film because they were too intense for families and children. And, one deleted shot shows the tornado completely enveloping the farmhouse. Later on, the Wicked Witch of the West scenes were trimmed because people thought that her performance was too frightening for audiences, which is sort of ironic because Judy Garland, in the production you were asking about, found it difficult to be afraid of Margaret Hamilton because she was such a nice lady off camera. So, what was scary for children viewers, Judy Garland said, well, she was delightful.
Most of us, Joe, know some of those cast members, but you're going back, 100 years or so with Judy Garland and Frank Morgan and such. Was there any news or information, behind-the-scenes story pertaining to the cast?
Yeah, some legendary ones, actually. Probably the most well-known, and I always, sometimes I assume people know these things, but I'm a film professor and maybe I know them and people don't. But originally, Buddy Ebsen was supposed to play the Tin Man, Buddy Ebsen from Beverly Hillbillies. And he you can actually find the screen test on a lot of the DVD extras or on YouTube. But he had an allergic reaction to the silver makeup that they put on. And so he had to quit and be replaced by Jack Haley. So, what might have been there with Buddy Ebsen. Judy Garland was always in mind, but there was an attempt to get another child star, and that would have been Shirley Temple. So there was an attempt to get Shirley Temple into the filming. A lot of the Munchkin actors actually played some of the winged monkeys, so there's some fun casting there. Trying to think of some other things that might be of interest. The Tin Man costume worn by Jack Haley was so stiff that he had to lean up against a board to rest when they weren't filming, which 38 years later is exactly what Anthony Daniels did when he was filming Star Wars and playing C-3PO in his costume. He had to lean up against a board just to rest. Another bit of casting, The Wizard of Oz, the title role was originally written with W.C. Fields in mind. And as I mentioned, there was an attempt to get Shirley Temple. And Fanny Bryce was originally considered to be Glinda the Good Witch. I know some of these names might not mean a lot to some people, but it's still a lot of fun. A couple of rumors and legends I want to either confirm or dispel. One of the legendary stories or urban legends, if you will, is that a Munchkin hung themselves on the set, and you can see their bodies swinging in the background. Not true. What is probably interpreted as that is actually a large bird. Some birds were on the set to kind of make it feel like a jungle, and they're just stretching their wings, and that's what people are misinterpreting. That has been debunked for many years, but the rumor still persists. Oh, you can see a hanging Munchkin, which is not true. And then another thing that's not really an urban legend, this is actually true, but it's just a sort of a coincidence, it's not a conspiracy, is the Pink Floyd syncing up with The Wizard of Oz. Have you ever heard of that, Ray?
No, I haven't. Tell me more.
Okay, so then I'm glad that I'm bringing it up. If you play Pink Floyd's album, Dark Side of the Moon, alongside of Wizard of Oz, it syncs up to an alternate soundtrack. And the band has denied that this is, ever they ever attempted to do this and dismisses it as nonsense. But it really does work. If you want to do this weekend, when the lion roars at the beginning of the MGM Lion, when the lion roars the third time, press play on Dark Side of the Moon and listen to the lyrics and listen to the songs come up. Just as an example, and there are many more. When it goes from black and white to color, the song "Money" comes on. So that's a kind of a funny one. But when she meets the Scarecrow for the first time, they start singing "The Lunatic is in the Grass."
Oh.
And anyway, I won't belabor the point, but a lot of people out there probably know what I'm talking about. But I'm glad I brought it up for those who don't.
I love that. Wizard of Oz, going back 1939. Great edition of Film School with Joe Fortunato. If you want to go back and listen to that again, we'll have it up for you at WAKR.net, the iconic film Wizard of Oz, WAKR.net. Good job, my friend Joe. Excellent job. We'll do it again next week.
I look forward to it. See you then.
There you go. Film study professor Joe Fortunato looking at the Wizard of Oz.